So, good morning, everyone. We cordially welcome Dr. Dhiren Gupta, who's a practicing pediatrician or practices at Sir Gangaram Hospital, New Delhi. Sir is a specialist in pediatric critical care and underwent intensive training in Australia, gaining good exposure as a kid specialist. Sir has specialized in various pediatric illnesses and ailments and also specialized in the treatment of various pediatric chronic diseases and emergencies. We cordially welcome you, sir.
Good morning. Thank you. So, should I start my presentation?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So, friends, today next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk on a very important issue, that is respiratory failure. And almost 60 to 70% of the patients who we get who come to emergency and require intensive care do end up in respiratory failure, right? So if even I'm working in periphery in an OPD like clinic or in a patient in even if I'm not having my own intensive care, but I need to know how to recognize respiratory failure clinically. That is the most important thing, right? And very important is to recognize it early, as soon as possible. Now, if we define respiratory failure, it's very simple. Means inadequate oxygenation due to lung failure or due to pump failure, patient is not able to expel the carbon dioxide. We call it hypercapnic respiratory failure. If it is pure hypoxemic, it is type 1 respiratory failure. And in pediatric, most often it's a mixed type of respiratory acidosis. So many patients come late to us. So you will find that it is sort of a mixed sort of acidosis, mixed sort of respiratory failure. Now, what we know that what are the causes of respiratory failure? Of course, if you find anything from brain to your lung and the blood supplying to the lung gets affected, it leads to hypoxemia or hypercarbia. So it can be like CNS depression, lung parenchymal problem, neuromuscular problem that can lead to respiratory failure. Very important cause we tend to miss is a refractory shock. A patient who presents with refractory shock, even if lung and brain is okay, they are the candidates of respiratory failure. Now, how to recognize? This is pediatric assessment triangle. We all know that in a patient with pure respiratory disease, there will be increase in work of breathing because of abnormal sound, abnormal position, retraction, flaring, but also it can affect the CNS, that is appearance, and also it can lead to poor circulation. So early respiratory distress, we can say that if patient is having work of breathing, or you can say hypoxemia, but your other system like brain and circulation to the skin is not affected, we say early. But if your counterparts like patient start becoming unconscious or patient become irritable, patient started having unstable hemodynamic, you can call it respiratory failure. For an example, this is a patient who is having a significant breathing issue, like he is having wheezing and retractions on the right side of the screen, you can see. But patient looks conscious, little bit anxious. Color looks okay, so we can say it is a early respiratory distress where appearance and circulation is normal. But if your CNS started getting affected, like in this patient, he looks very drowsy. So definitely this is a case of respiratory failure. And of course, if your color also get affected, like you can see, this is a mottling happening because of respiratory disease, or otherwise also you can say definitely cardiovascular system has been affected, likely respiratory failure. Now, what are the stages of respiratory distress? It can be any, like patient may start feeling little bit dizzy, may become irritable, especially in infancy, or you may find Ehlers-Danlos flaring, like in this patient where oxygenation is absolutely normal and it's just little bit Ehlers-Danlos flaring with some grunting. Or patient, if it progresses, can have subcostal retractions in form of chest in drawing, as you can view this. If it further progresses, it can lead to lot of grunting and especially suprasternal chest retraction. This indicates very severe form of respiratory distress. So these are the various stages of respiratory distress and which can lead to respiratory failure. Now, today my presentation is going to revolve around what mistake can be committed during recognition and what should be the initial respiratory support. And the whole presentation is case based where some mistakes were committed. What mistakes can lead to problem in a pediatric patient? If we try to ventilate, taken respiratory support, give unnecessary intubate, take unnecessary, procedures like intubation, it may be mistake. But of course, too late giving respiratory support is going to be the blunder. Another mistake, decision based on blood gas. ABG is rarely helpful in recognizing respiratory failure except few conditions. Most of the time it can mislead you. 90% of the decisions are based on clinical examination, and especially we forget the work of breathing, which we are going to talk about. Again, wait for gasping, apnea, and arrest is crime. I would say presently in the present scenario. So I'm going to discuss the scenarios where we require respiratory failure, where we require some respiratory support, and some mistakes were committed, and we'll try to learn from those mistakes. This is a 2-year-old presented with foreign body peanut inhalation 24 hours back. It was extracted by rigid bronchoscope, shifted to the ward as in a usual patient, but this patient developed significant tachypnea and work of breathing. Also, this patient developed tachycardia, though saturation was 99. Look at this patient, looks little bit irritable. If you look at the saturation was 99, though patient had tachycardia. Now, at this time, this patient should have been provided respiratory support. This was 22 years back. So there was no HFNC, no NIV. So patient was just given oxygen. We thought of various differential diagnoses. We gave steroid, adrenaline, thinking of upper airway edema. But within an hour, look at the patient condition. Patient became drowsy, patient became irritable. And this is frank case of respiratory failure. We need not to wait till this time. We should have acted here only that when patient presented with tachycardia. So mistake is that like we missed the window period for respiratory support and patient got exhausted. So exhaustion should be avoided in any patient, any case of respiratory failure. What should be the time of respiratory support? Whenever you find, especially when we should intubate these type of patients, when patient having significant increased work of breathing, that too with the maximum treatment. So that should be remembered. But if you are in doubt, should I intubate? Should I give respiratory support? Less mistake, even if you intubate, means without clear-cut exhaustion, without clear-cut hypoxemia, just patient is having irritability, patient is having the tachycardia, patient is having unstable hemodynamic because of respiratory problem. Other factor which influence your respiratory support or intubation is the disease progress and potentially reversibility of that disease process. Now look at this patient, a case of pneumonia, a 5-year-old who presented with fast breathing for 4 days. There's increased irritability and work of breathing for 1 day. There is no significant pleural effusion. So it is not like you put in a tube and things get reversed. On injectable antibiotic for past almost 2 days. Look at this patient. This patient is irritable, little bit drowsy. Though saturation is again 100% with just minimal oxygen of 4 liters. So again, don't wait and watch for very high FiO2 requirement. This is a patient who requires stabilization and may require early intubation. And at least now you can start with NIV, HFNC. Look at how the patient become conscious and may require advanced strategy of intubation. So what are the strategy? What are the type of patients? What are the type of etiology where you require early intubation, like in ARDS, post-head trauma with decreasing GCS? This is very important. Guillain-Barré syndrome with stormy onset, unable to maintain airway, you should definitely intubate these patients. A septic shock who is land up in catecholamine refractory shock, and you are not able to maintain hemodynamics. Now look at this patient of asthma. She is she just presented with acute asthma and start disease started 24 hours back. We are not able to provide beta 2 agonist. She's very irritable. Look at her eyes, look at her anxiousness. She's using accessory muscles of respiration. High FiO2 requirement is there. In these type of patients, especially when we talk about asthma, you should give beta 2 agonist trial, even if patient present with the respiratory failure. Though this patient, we tried beta 2 agonist and patient became more irritable, we needed to intubate. But nowadays, we can always omit the intubation by NIV in an asthma. Of course, without trial of bronchodilator is going to be the mistake, and normal carbon dioxide is is a sign of impending respiratory failure in a patient of asthma. We expect carbon dioxide to be on the lower side. And as I told you, NIV should be tried before you intubate, especially in case of asthma. Now, there are some potential reversible conditions like a seizure disorder where you are given benzodiazepine. There can be little bit respiratory failure that can be managed by your oxygen. And if patient is having upper airway obstruction like laryngotracheal bronchitis, you can give adrenaline nebulization. But only one condition is precondition is there. Patient should be hemodynamically stable. Now look at this 12-year-old child who presented with fever for 4 days, respiratory distress, RT-PCR, COVID is positive. In these patients, of course, we should always try NIV despite that this patient had a very high FiO2 requirement, especially when we talk about COVID. This is again a case of MISC who presented with a hypotension for 1 day. He was a neglected hypoxemic, means patient had hypoxemia for almost 24 hours. It was neglected. And the doctor was trying to give IVIG because in the case of MISC, look at the irritability and consciousness. So when patient becomes so drowsy and irritable, mistake was we were waiting for desaturation and patient actually required respiratory support. This was a recent case still with us, 11-year-old who presented with fever for 5 days, cough for 6 days, unable to swallow. For 2 days, there is tachypnea for 1 day and patient desaturating to 76%. 96% oxygen saturation is maintained by HFNC. Patient had just bulbar palsy, lower motor neuron type of palsy, and blood gas showed carbon dioxide of 33. Look at this child. This was a big dilemma, and at this stage, should we intubate because his respiratory excursion was not that bad. Though he was using accessory muscles of respiration, he was not able to move his chest. His blood gas was okay. There was no major work of breathing, and saturation he was maintaining on HFNC. Now look at another 36 hours. This patient also couldn't tolerate HFNC, loss of voice, and this patient at this stage was intubated in emergency procedure and whole left lung got collapsed. So what mistake? This patient should have provided the support, adequate support previously when patient came. If you look at the number in a patient of neuromyo problem, then clinical progression can be missed. So clinical progression, clinical examination is very important, and ultimately patient was intubated. Now patient is doing well, and probably today we are going to extubate this patient. Again, a patient of neuromyopathy. Look at this child. This, can you imagine this patient developed cardiopulmonary arrest after 15 minutes? This has been taken in emergency. It looks very stable. There is no respiratory distress, and carbon dioxide was 200 at this stage. So what is the mistake we commit in neuromyopathy? If you wait for respiratory distress to develop, means work of breathing, and you don't do blood gas in these patients because they don't have muscle power to develop respiratory distress. That is a major mistake we commit. So in a case of neuromyopathy, always look at the clinical progression. Always go for the blood gases. Like these are the two cases of fulminant hepatic failure. And patient is not desaturating. There is no work of breathing. He's just hypotonic and comatose. This is another child. This is a typical child of fulminant hepatic failure who is very irritable, inconsolable. So, in case of CNS dysfunction, if we wait for respiratory distress and desaturation, it is going to be a mistake. And Glasgow Coma scale less than 9, equal to 9, and progression of disease is very, very important. Now we move to the treatment part, right? What we know about the treatment, oxygen. Of course, we are going to give oxygen support, but at times we try to mask the disease by giving oxygen, especially if in a case of upper airway obstruction. If you give very high FiO2, what you're going to mask the carbon dioxide rise. And you may find, okay, saturation is fine, absolutely fine. Why I should take the airway into my hand? What you're doing, you're giving too much oxygen and you're masking the carbon dioxide rise. If the lungs are absolutely normal, just because of the airway issue, your patient is desaturating. That is very ominous sign. Probably you need to check the carbon dioxide in this patient. Again, if you try to prick these patients, they become more irritable and your partial airway can become complete airway obstruction, right? This is a very important thing. So you need to act clinically. Again, if you give an oxygen and patient oxygen saturation immediately improves, likely there is a diffusion defect. But if patient oxygen saturation is not improving, it may be VQ mismatch. So you can differentiate what the type, what could be the cause, what is the pathophysiology of the respiratory failure. Now we come to the ventilator support. Most of the patient which I showed you required intubation, but nowadays we have got high flow nasal cannula. We have got NIV. So you can use these devices. But again, take my word, if you don't have invasive ventilator support, don't try this support for too long. Refer this patient because very soon this patient may end up in actual respiratory failure where you require intubation. So these are, you can say, time buying processes. Now, most important thing which I feel is if any disease which is rapidly progressive, these are unstable hemodynamics, progressive airway maintenance issues like Guillain-Barré syndrome. Don't try NIV and HFNC. And definitely these are the patients where you should go for invasive ventilation. Your HFNC, NIV may give you 1 hour, 2 hour, but don't rely on these two non-invasive or oxygen by mask. So I conclude my presentation. The most important thing is to recognize respiratory failure early. Clinical recognition is very important. Especially it is important for the outcome. Nowadays, it's very difficult to die in ICU, but it's the brain, the CNS outcome that carries the most important thing in the life. So neurologically intact survival should be our aim. For that, you need to recognize early the respiratory failure and you should act. Work of breathing, refractory shock, unable to maintain airway, especially Glasgow Coma scale less than 9, should be recognized. Support should be considered. Don't wait for desaturation and don't wait for patient to guess. So these are the most important point which we have learned over 25 years. And thank you very much for the patient hearing. Thank you. I stop sharing.